She's lived in 5 different states while enjoying a 30-year career in information technology. She joined our church shortly after she returned home to Georgia in 2010. She has been a truth student for over 20 years, and she found Unity in the year 2000. She's had over 150 years of training in Unity's Spiritual Enrichment Education Program and is working on becoming a licensed Unity teacher. She's also a Chopra Center certified meditation instructor. So let's give a warm welcome to Valerie Scruggs.
I want to thank you all for taking the opportunity to come here, or letting me have the opportunity to come speak to you today. I consider myself a student of truth, and I'm teaching what I need to learn. And I'm happy to have you all here to listen to me today. Especially on the day of 9/11, it's a day that we all, I believe, are taking some time to do some reflection. And I think we all have a memory of where we were or what we were doing that day. And I hope you've had the opportunity, or will have the opportunity today, to share that with someone you know or someone you love. I'm going to share my story a little bit today, because I'll always remember that day. I was living in Irving, Texas, just outside Dallas. And I was going about my morning routine. I had the Today Show on television, listened to Matt and Katie, and about 7:45 Central Time, I heard Katie say, "Oh, there's a plane has hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center." And I thought, man, somebody really screwed up. Because in my mind, it was a Cessna or a little twin-engine plane. And then when I came around and saw the television, I was like, whoa. And my father, I thought about my father. He's a retired airline pilot. And so I thought, man, he's going to have a lot to say about the pilot that flew that plane. So I continued going on about my routine, and then the second plane hit. And I knew then it was no accident. So I went into hurry-up mode. I was working for a bank, and I worked on the disaster recovery team. And banks being high-value targets, I thought there could be a likelihood that we would have to enact some of our disaster recovery procedures. So I jumped in the car and started heading for the office. My office was adjacent to DFW, literally right beside the runway. And I was driving towards the airport, and I looked off. I could see the Dallas skyline in the distance, and I looked down thinking, half expecting to see a plume of smoke coming from there, because who knew at this point what was going on. So as I continued on driving towards the airport, I saw this amazing sight. It was just, the sky was filled with airplanes as far as you could see. For that time, FAA had shut down the U.S. Airways and were ordering all planes on the ground immediately. So I got to the office, I checked in with my boss, determined there was really nothing that we were going to do right now, that we would just stay on alert. I go out to talk to my staff. There, along with everyone else in the office, they're lined up against the windows watching the planes land, one every 30 seconds. It was really incredible. So I tried to get some work done. I went back to my office trying to distract myself, and then I had to go out and talk to a staff member about something. And our office, our work area was adjacent to our capital markets trade desk, where the mortgage-backed securities were traded. And so they had televisions there to monitor news. And so I'm standing there talking to one of my staff members, and I couldn't help but see the TV just over his shoulder. And I was standing there talking to him when the first tower fell. And I just stopped mid-sentence, and he turned around to see why my jaw was open. And the whole office just kind of everything got quiet, everybody stood up and gathered around the television. So I knew then that no work was going to get done that day. I told my staff they could go home if that's what they want to do, to be near loved ones, because I think we all felt the need to be near loved ones that day. So I went home, I called my family, and talked to them about it. And then I continued watching television. And as I watched the events continue to unfold, I started crying. I was crying for the lives that were being lost before our eyes. It was amazing to me. And then I started becoming aware of another deep sadness. I started thinking about the perpetrators of this tragedy. I started thinking about, at some point in their lives, they must have been totally empty. There must have been some deep void that needed to be filled. They were totally and utterly separated from their divinity. They were totally and utterly separated from God. As Aristotle said, nature abhors a vacuum. So this separation that created this void in these people had to be filled. And it was filled with anger and jealousy and rage. I couldn't imagine how desperate that feeling must be. Of course, they probably were not aware of their separation, because over time that separation, because it was so filled with hatred, they wouldn't be aware of it. So there's an extreme case of what I call forgotten divinity. It's what can happen when someone becomes separated from God. So while we're taking today to remember the souls that were lost on that tragic day, and to honor the heroes who attempted to save their lives, let's take time to remember who we are. Let's take time to remember our divinity. In the Gospel according to John, Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me." Charles Fillmore talks about this verse in his book, The Mysteries of John, and what Charles says is, "An understanding of man's spiritual nature reveals his unity with the omnipresent principle of life. Jesus Christ is the Father, and the Father is man. Whoever sees the spirituality of a man in himself or others sees the Father." What Charles is saying is that Jesus Christ is the Father, and the Father is in all of us. And that he's saying that when we recognize the consciousness within ourselves and within others, then we realize our own divinity. We become one with God. In his book, Peace is the Way, Deepak Chopra says, consciousness isn't an internal phenomenon. It needs to flow outward, and this happens through relationships. You can't bring about a peaceful world except by relating peacefully. He says that relationships are the crucible of reality. So what Deepak is suggesting is that it's through relationships that ideas become manifest. Relationships are how we find peaceful solutions to tough problems. It's how we determine whether an idea will survive the rough and tumble of the marketplace. He says a world peace comes about as we relate to each other as peaceful beings one at a time. We're so quick to judge, to categorize, to stereotype people, places, things, and actions. This response comes from our ego, because our ego wants to maintain a separate identity. Now, I'm not suggesting that we crush or kill our ego, but I am suggesting that we manage it. For the ego helps us by establishing boundaries. But these boundaries can become fences, and these fences can become walls. And unless we consciously manage our ego, our thoughts or these walls become barriers or into our divinity. So we do this by managing our thoughts. We become aware when we're making judgments and generalizations. Once we notice we're making these judgments, we go a step further. We reach out. We ask questions. We take time to connect, to get to know one another. Asking questions is particularly important in relating to other human beings. We all come from different places, from different cultures, from different families. Yet as children of God, we're all one family. We're all one consciousness. In his book, Peace is the Way, Deepak Chopra says, ultimately there is no them, because everyone is connected. We have to be willing to think at the level of collective consciousness, the awareness that makes us one humanity as a daily way of thinking. Otherwise, the us versus them logic takes hold. I have to take another moment to share another New York story. I lived on the Upper West Side of Manhattan for 3 years, and several of my neighbors there had lived there for 40 years or more, but they never spoke to each other. And as I was talking to one of them, I found out that one lady, I'll call her Judy, didn't like another lady who I'll call Denise, because Denise had failed to speak to her at a party one day. And so I said, well, maybe she was just having a bad day. Maybe, you know, she just She let it go, and she said, oh no, it was on purpose. So one perceived slight set in motion decades of us versus them thinking in Judy's mind. But we have to break out of these patterns of thinking. We have to continue reaching out to one another. We have to open our hearts and minds and connect at a deeper level by ignoring these perceived slights or judgments. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus gives us the Beatitudes. One of those is, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. The metaphysical definition of meek is anyone who is highly trained to react to negative stimuli with love, instead of with an eye for an eye mentality. In this context, earth is manifestation of the whole of your outer experience. So to inherit the earth means to have dominion over your outer experience, and that is to say to have power to bring your life into harmony and true success. Emmett Fox wrote a book about the Sermon on the Mount, and he says that meekness is a combination of open-mindedness, faith in God, and the realization that the will of God is always something joyous, interesting, and vital, and much better than anything we could think of ourselves. He goes on to say, this state of mind also includes the perfect willingness to allow the will of God to come about in whatever way divine wisdom considers best, rather than in some way we've chosen for ourselves. Indignation, resentment, the desire to punish other people or to see them punished, to get even, the feeling that serves them right, all these form an impenetrable barrier to our spiritual power or progress. So what are some ways that we can move past these judgments and connect with our divinity? Well, one of them I've already been talking about, which is observe your thoughts. So as you move through your day, take time to notice your thoughts. Ask yourself, what am I thinking right now? Where did that come from? How does that make me feel? Our thoughts come from our prior experiences, our family, our cultural backgrounds. And one of the core principles of unity is that we create our lives through our thinking. So when observing your thoughts, ask yourself, am I thinking for myself, or am I thinking like a middle-aged person? A southerner, a white woman, my father. By identifying the thinker, we identify what is separating us from others. Be kind to yourself, though. Observe your thoughts without judgment, because judging yourself is the same as judging others. I once heard Deepak say that accepting our own humanity brings us closer to enlightenment. Thinking is the formulating process of the mind, is the inlet and the outlet of all of our ideas. It is active, zealous, impulsive, and sometimes unwise. Charles Fillmore says, the thinking faculty makes you a free agent because it is your creative center. And in and through this one power, you establish your consciousness. You build your world. He goes on to say, through violation of this faculty, you can refuse to receive ideas from Christ. You can cut yourself off from the realm of original truth. Once again, returning to the Beatitudes, Jesus said, blessed are the merciful, for they will have mercy. Emmett Fox says, be merciful in your thoughts. The true thought about fellow man blesses him spiritually, mentally, and materially, and blesses you too. He goes on to say, let us be merciful in our mental judgments of our brother, for in truth we are all one. And the more deeply he seems to err, the more urgent is the need to help him with right thought, and so to make it easier for him to get free. What Emmett is saying here is that because we understand the power of the spiritual idea, the Christ truth, then we have a responsibility that when we notice transgressions by others, we need to remember that the Christ in the other is calling out for help. So be merciful. Another way in which we can connect with that divine spark is practicing namaste. Namaste is a Sanskrit word for the spirit in me respects the spirit in you, or the divinity in me bows to the divinity in you. It represents the belief that within us all there is a divine spark. So practicing namaste means acknowledging that spark. And an easy way to do this is to make eye contact. We do this all the time with people we know, but I urge you to take a moment to do it with a stranger, maybe with a